The photograph arrived at the Michigan Historical Society in Detroit as part of an estate donation from the descendants of Stefan Kowalski, a Polish-American photographer who had operated a studio in Detroit's Polish neighborhood from 1912 to 1935. Among hundreds of routine portrait negatives was one image that immediately caught the attention of James Thompson, the Society's photography curator, in February 2024. The black and white photograph, dated June 15, 1920, showed a young woman in a white dress holding an infant, standing in front of what appeared to be a modest wooden house. The photographer's stamp from Kowalski Studios, Detroit, was clearly visible. At first glance, it appeared to be a typical motherhood portrait from the post-World War I era, the kind of sentimental image new mothers often commissioned to commemorate their children's early months. The woman appeared to be in her late teens or early 20s, her dark hair pulled back in the fashion of the period. She wore a simple white cotton dress that suggested modest circumstances. The infant she held looked to be perhaps 3 or 4 months old, wrapped in a white christening gown. The house behind them was wooden, slightly weathered, with a small porch and plain windows. But when Thompson examined the photograph more closely under magnification, he noticed something unusual about the woman's expression. Despite holding her baby, her face showed no maternal joy or contentment. Instead, her eyes appeared fearful, almost desperate, and her grip on the infant seemed protective rather than tender. She wasn't smiling at the camera or gazing lovingly at her child. She was staring directly at the lens with an expression that suggested profound anxiety. More puzzling was the setting. The house in the background didn't match the professional studio backdrop typical of formal portraits from that period. The image appeared to have been taken outdoors in natural light, suggesting either an informal family snapshot or a hurried documentation for unknown purposes. Thompson had examined thousands of photographs from Kowalski Studios, and this outdoor setting was highly unusual for photographers' work. There was something else that troubled Thompson. The woman's posture suggested she was ready to flee at any moment. Her body was angled slightly away from the camera, her feet positioned as if she might turn and run. One hand held the infant close to her chest in protective embrace, but the other hand was clenched in a fist at her side, white-knuckled with tension. Thompson decided to research the photograph's origins. He contacted Dr. Maria Kowalski-Chen, the granddaughter of photographer Stefan Kowalski, who had donated her grandfather's archive to the Historical Society. Dr. Kowalski-Chen, now 78 years old, was a retired history professor who had spent years organizing her grandfather's materials. "My grandfather documented every commission, even informal ones," Dr. Kowalski-Chen explained when Thompson showed a photograph. He believed photographs were historical documents that future generations would treasure. He never imagined they might become evidence in unsolved mysteries. She pulled out ledgers from 1920, carefully preserved books where Stefan Kowalski had recorded every photographic session. The client's name, the date, the location, the purpose of the photograph, and the amount charged. The studio records for June 15, 1920, revealed an unusual entry that immediately caught Thompson's attention. The entry read simply, "June 15, 1920, woman with infant, 23rd Street house, no payment, special circumstances." There was no client name listed, which was extremely unusual. Stefan Kowalski had been meticulous about recording names. The notation, special circumstances, appeared nowhere else in the ledgers. Dr. Kowalski-Chen frowned as she read the entry. "This is very strange," she said. "Grandfather rarely photographed people without proper documentation, and he never worked for free, unless it was for family or for a very important reason." She retrieved another set of documents, Stefan Kowalski's personal diary, which he had kept throughout his career. The diary entry for June 15, 1920, provided more context but raised even more questions. "Unusual commission today," Stefan had written. "Young woman, very frightened, came to studio asking for photograph to be taken immediately. She insisted it must be taken in front of specific house on 23rd Street, not in studio. She would not give her name. She carried infant child, perhaps 3 to 4 months old. She said she needed proof that we were here." Her exact words, "If something happens to us, someone should know we existed." I did not charge her. Something about her fear seemed genuine, desperate. I felt compelled to help. The diary entry continued. She would not say who she was fleeing from or why she needed the photograph. She kept looking over her shoulder as I set up the camera. When I asked for her name for my records, she said only, "It doesn't matter anymore." After I took the photograph, she thanked me in Polish and disappeared into the neighborhood. I developed a plate immediately, made 2 prints. I gave her 1 print and kept 1 for my files. I have a bad feeling about this situation. Thompson felt a chill reading Stefan's words. This wasn't a simple motherhood portrait. This was documentation created by a woman who feared for her life and wanted proof of her existence preserved. The diary's next relevant entry came 3 weeks later. July 10th, 1920, Police Detective Murphy visited studio asking about unidentified woman and infant. Provided copy of photograph taken June 15th. Detective would not explain nature of investigation, but seemed very concerned about woman's welfare. Asked many questions about her behavior, whether she seemed distressed, whether she mentioned where she was going. I told him everything I could remember. He said if woman contacts me again, I should notify police immediately. He gave me his card. Dr. Kowalski-chin looked up from the diary. This suggests the photograph wasn't just a family portrait, she said. It may have been connected to a police investigation. Thompson obtained permission to access Detroit Police Department records from 1920, stored in the city's central archives. Detective Lieutenant Sarah Chun, who specialized in cold cases, agreed to help Thompson search for references to mysterious photograph and its connection to any official investigations. The search through missing persons files from summer 1920 revealed multiple cases involving young women and children, a reflection of the social upheaval following World War I and the economic challenges facing immigrant families during the early Prohibition era. However, one case immediately stood out as potentially connected to Stefan Kowalski's mysterious photograph. On June 18, 1920, just 3 days after the photograph was taken, Detective Patrick Murphy had filed a missing persons report for Anna Kowalczyk, age 19, and her infant son, Stanislav, age 4 months. The report described Anna as approximately 5 feet 4 inches tall, slender build, dark hair, last seen wearing a white dress. The physical description matched the woman in the photograph. The missing persons report contained disturbing details. Anna had been living at a boarding house on Michigan Avenue for 6 months. The boarding house operator, Mrs. Helena Harrison, had reported Anna missing when she failed to return to her room for 3 consecutive days, and all her belongings remained in place. Mrs. Harrison told police that Anna had been increasingly fearful in the weeks before her disappearance. Detective Murphy's investigation notes, handwritten on yellow paper, provided crucial context. Subject Anna Kowalczyk arrived in Detroit from Chicago in December 1919. Murphy had written, claims to be widow of Polish immigrant worker who died in an industrial accident. However, attempts to verify this claim have been unsuccessful. No records of her marriage or husband's death can be located. Subject appears to be using assumed name. The notes continued. Subject has been observed meeting with various individuals in Polish neighborhood, always in public places, always appearing anxious. Boarding house operator reports that subject sleeps very little, startles at sudden noises, refuses to allow anyone to photograph or sketch her. Yet on June 12th, subject specifically asked Mrs. Harrison for recommendation of photographer, saying she needed picture taken for documentation. Murphy had written, on June 16th, received information from Mrs. Harrison that subject had mentioned to fellow boarder that she needed to protect Stanislav from the people who killed his father. When Mrs. Harrison pressed for details, Anna had refused to elaborate. The detective's notes indicated that he had visited Stefan Kowalski's photography studio on July 8, 1920, after learning that Anna had been seen carrying a camera receipt from Kowalski Studios. He had obtained a copy of the photograph, which matched the description of the missing woman. Murphy's investigation had continued through July and August 1920, but the trail had gone cold. The final entry in the case file, dated September 1st, 1920, read, case remains open but inactive. No trace of Anna Kowalczyk or infant Stanislav. Witnesses report seeing woman matching description boarding train to Chicago on June 19th. Chicago police notified but have found no evidence of her arrival or residence. Subject may have used different name. Boarding house belongings held as evidence. Thompson felt the weight of the mystery settling over him. Who was Anna Kowalczyk really? Why had she been so frightened? Who had killed the father of a child? And why did she believe she and her son were in danger? And most importantly, what had happened to them after they disappeared? Thompson's investigation into Anna Kowalczyk's background revealed layers of complexity and tragedy that transformed a simple photograph from a motherhood portrait into evidence of a much larger story about immigration, identity, and survival in 1920s America. With Detective Chen's help, Thompson accessed the boarding house records preserved by the Harrison family descendants. The boarding house's guest registry showed that Anna had rented room 7 on the second floor from December 20th, 1919, through June 18th, 1920. She had paid her weekly rent reliably, never caused problems, but kept to herself. Mrs. Helena Harrison had kept a private journal documenting her observations about her boarders. The entries about Anna revealed details about her behavior during her final weeks at the boarding house. They showed a young woman living in constant fear while desperately trying to protect her infant son. Anna has become increasingly agitated, Mrs. Harrison wrote on May 20th, 1920. She barely sleeps, spends hours watching the street from her window. She asks me repeatedly whether any strangers have come asking about her. Yesterday she fainted in the hallway, not from illness but from exhaustion and what appears to be constant terror. I try to help her, but she refuses all comfort, saying only that they will find her eventually. Another entry from June 10th, 1920, just days before Anna commissioned the photograph, was particularly revealing. Anna asked me this morning if I knew a trustworthy photographer. She said she needed a picture taken of herself with baby Stanislav, but it had to be taken in front of a specific house, not in the studio. When I asked why, she said she needed proof that we were here, that we existed, in case something happens. Her words chilled me. I gave her Stefan Kowalski's name. I know he is a good man who has helped many Polish immigrants with documentation. Fellow boarder Miss Józefa Nowak, who had befriended Anna despite her secretive nature, provided additional context in a 1920 statement to police that Thompson found in the investigation files. According to Miss Nowak, Anna confided that she possessed papers that proved important men were liars, and that these documents made her valuable to some people and dangerous to others. Anna had also told Miss Nowak that she had taken a photograph with baby Stanislav as proof that we were here in case something happens to us. She had specifically mentioned wanting the picture taken in front of the house on 23rd Street, where we were supposed to be safe. Thompson researched the house that appeared in the photograph's background. City property records from 1920 showed that the house at 1847, 23rd Street, was owned by Jan Kowalski, no relation to photographer Stefan, a Polish immigrant who worked as a labor organizer. The house had reportedly been used as a safe house for Polish immigrants facing various difficulties: workers fleeing dangerous employers, women escaping abusive situations, people trying to hide from creditors or legal troubles. Detective Murphy's investigation notes mentioned the 23rd Street house. Subject Anna specifically requested photograph be taken in front of house at 1847 23rd Street. Murphy had written, "This property is known to police as location used by Polish underground network for harboring individuals. Owner Jan Kowalski claims to have no knowledge of Anna Kowalczyk, but his denial seems rehearsed. Network is known for protecting members from outside authorities." Thompson contacted descendants of the 23rd Street property owner. Maria Kowalskichin revealed that her grandfather Stefan had been distantly related to Jan Kowalski, and that both men had been involved in helping Polish immigrants navigate the challenges of life in America during the difficult post-war years. "My grandfather kept a private journal documenting the families he had assisted," Maria explained. But the journal was destroyed in a house fire in 1942. "However, I remember family stories about a young mother with a baby who stayed with us briefly in 1920, and who especially frightened of being found." According to family oral history, Anna had arrived at the safe house in mid-June 1920, claiming that government agents were tracking her movements in Detroit. She had requested help leaving the city, but had insisted on having a photograph taken in front of the house first. The story passed down in our family was that she wanted proof that good people would try to help her, Maria explained. She said if anything happened to her, someone should know that there were Americans who cared about protecting innocent people. The timing aligned perfectly with Stefan Kowalski's photograph session on June 15, 1920. Anna had apparently used the safe house as her backdrop because it represented hope and protection. But who was Anna Kowalczyk really, and what papers did she possess that made her so valuable and dangerous? Thompson expanded his research to including viewed immigration records, labor disputes, and political investigations from 1919 to 1920. He discovered that Anna Kowalczyk was indeed a false name. Her real identity was Anna Zalewski, and her story was far more complex and tragic than the missing persons report had suggested. Anna Zalewski had arrived in America from Poland in 1918 at age 17, sponsored by her uncle who worked in Chicago's meatpacking district. Immigration records showed she had married Pyotr Zalewski, a labor organizer, in Chicago in February 1919. Their son, Stanislav, was born in January 1920. But in March 1920, Pyotr Zalewski had been killed in what was officially ruled an industrial accident at the meatpacking plant where he worked. However, labor organizers claimed the death was actually murder, that Pyotr had been killed by company enforcers because of his efforts to organize workers. Thompson found newspaper articles from Chicago labor publications that told a different story from the official version. According to these sources, Pyotr Zalewski had been documenting unsafe working conditions and evidence of company bribes to government inspectors. He had collected photographs, witness statements, and financial documents proving systematic violations of safety regulations and corruption involving company officials and government inspectors. After Pyotr's death, Anna had disappeared from Chicago with these documents. Labor organizers believed she had fled because company enforcers were searching for her, wanting to recover the evidence her husband had collected. Some believe company agents had killed Pyotr specifically to prevent his documentation from being made public. Anna had apparently arrived in Detroit in December 1919, before Pyotr's death, suggesting she had fled Chicago earlier than previously thought, using the assumed name Anna Kowalczyk. She had been trying to stay hidden while determining what to do with the evidence her husband had collected. Thompson found references to Anna in correspondence between Polish labor organizers in Chicago and Detroit from 1920. Letters described efforts to locate Pyotr's widow and to recover the documentation she possessed. Some letters expressed concern for her safety, while others focused more on the value of the evidence she held. One letter, dated May 1920, was particularly revealing. A Chicago labor organizer wrote to his Detroit counterpart, "We must find Anna Zalewski. The document she possesses could expose the entire system of corruption in the meatpacking industry. But she is frightened and does not trust us. She believes everyone wants to use her and her husband's death for political purposes. She may try to disappear completely rather than allow the documents to be used." Another letter, from June 1920, expressed different concerns. "We have learned that company agents are also searching for Anna. They will stop at nothing to recover Pyotr's evidence and silence anyone who might testify about his murder. We must find her before they do, not only to obtain the documents, but to protect her and her child." Thompson realized that Anna had been caught between multiple interests: labor organizers who wanted the evidence her husband had collected, company enforcers who wanted to destroy that evidence and anyone who might publicize it, and possibly government agents investigating corruption. She had trusted no one and had been trying to protect both her child and her husband's legacy while staying alive. The photograph took on new meaning in this context. Anna had commissioned it as documentation of her existence, but also potentially as a message. By posing in front of the safe house, she was creating a record that she had sought protection, that people had tried to help her, and that whatever happened next, she had been real, her son had been real, and her fear had been justified. Thompson found one more crucial document in Detective Murphy's case files. A telegram received by Detroit police on July 25, 1920, from Chicago authorities. "Request information Anna Zalewski, a.k.a. Anna Kowalczyk, believed to be in possession of documents related to ongoing investigation of industrial corruption. Subject: an infant son last seen Detroit, June 1920. Any information regarding whereabouts should be reported immediately to federal investigators. So federal authorities had also been searching for Anna. She hadn't been paranoid. Multiple parties had indeed been tracking her. Thompson's search for what happened to Anna Zalewski after she disappeared from Detroit in June 1920 led him to archives across the Midwest. With Detective Chen's help, he traced possible sightings and records that might indicate where Anna and baby Stanislav had gone. He found evidence that Anna had indeed boarded a train to Chicago on June 19, 1920, as witnesses had reported to Detective Murphy, but she hadn't stayed in Chicago. Thompson discovered records from a Catholic charity organization in Chicago that provided assistance to Polish refugees and immigrants. The charity's records, preserved in the Archdiocese of Chicago archives, included an entry from late June 1920. Young woman with infant, giving name as Helena Nowak, arrived seeking assistance with travel to Milwaukee. Woman appeared frightened, explained she was fleeing dangerous situation, provided temporary shelter and train fare. Woman specifically requested we not keep detailed records of her visit. We agreed due to obvious fear for her safety. The description matched Anna, and the timing was perfect. She had apparently reached Chicago, obtained help from a Catholic charity, using yet another false name, and continued to Milwaukee. Thompson contacted historical societies and archives in Milwaukee. Dr. Tomasz Kowalski, a historian specializing in Polish-American communities, provided access to records from Milwaukee's Polish social organizations from the 1920s. These records revealed that a woman matching Anna's description had arrived in Milwaukee in late June 1920 with a young infant. She had sought assistance from St. Stanislaus Catholic Church, which operated a shelter for Polish immigrants. Church records from July 1920 documented her arrival, but listed her name as Maria Wojcik. Father Kazimierz Wojciechowski, the priest who had operated the shelter, had kept detailed notes about the people he assisted. His notes about Maria Wojcik were extensive and troubling. Young mother arrived July 1st, 1920, with infant approximately 5 months old. Father Wojciechowski had written, "Woman is clearly traumatized, speaks little, trusts no one. She carries a leather portfolio which she guards constantly, never letting out of her sight. She has confided to Sister Agnes that she possesses evidence of great evil and fears that powerful men want to silence her. She says her husband was killed for trying to expose corruption, and she fears she and her son will meet the same fate." The priest's notes continued over several weeks, documenting Anna's time at the shelter. "Woman is intelligent and well-educated despite her youth," he wrote. "She has shown me portions of the documents she carries, photographs of terrible working conditions, statements from workers who witnessed company violence, financial records proving bribes to government officials. This evidence could indeed be dangerous to powerful interests. I have advised her to give these documents to federal authorities, but she says she does not trust government officials, believing some are complicit in the corruption her husband exposed." On July 25, 1920, the same day federal investigators sent their telegram to Detroit police, Father Wojciechowski's notes took an ominous turn. Maria reports seeing suspicious men asking questions at nearby boarding houses about a young woman with an infant. She believes she has been tracked to Milwaukee. She is terrified. I have arranged emergency relocation through our network. She and child will be sent to rural community where Polish farmers have agreed to provide shelter. The priest's final note about Anna, dated July 27, 1920, read simply, "Maria and infant departed for farm community. I pray they find the safety and peace they seek. I have kept no records of their destination. May God protect them." Thompson hit a dead end. If Father Wojciechowski had kept no records of where Anna went, how could he possibly trace her further? But Dr. Kowalski suggested another approach. Polish immigrant communities were tight-knit, he explained. Information was passed through informal networks, protected by people who understood the need for discretion. If Anna reached a rural Polish community in 1920, there might be family stories, oral histories that were never written down but were passed through generations. Thompson and Dr. Kowalski spent months contacting descendants of Polish farming families who had lived in rural Wisconsin, in the 1920s. They interviewed elderly community members, attended Polish-American cultural events, and gradually pieced together fragments of stories that had been passed down within families. Finally, in September 2024, they found a crucial lead, Stefan Wojcik, an 89-year-old resident of a Polish community near Stevens Point, Wisconsin, remembered his grandmother telling stories about a young woman who had come to their farm in the summer of 1920. My grandmother would talk about the frightened girl with a baby who stayed with them for a while when my grandfather was young, Wojcik told Thompson. She said the girl had a sad story, that her husband had been killed by bad men, and she was running to keep her baby safe. My grandmother said the girl stayed on the farm for about a year, helping with chores, keeping to herself. Then one day she left, said she was going to Canada where she thought she'd be safer. Wojcik retrieved a photograph from his family collection. It showed a group of people standing in front of a barn, dated 1921. In the back row, barely visible, was a young woman holding a toddler. Though the image was faded and unclear, Thompson believed it might be Anna and Stanislav. My grandmother kept this picture her whole life, Wojcik said. She would point to that woman in the back and say, "That's the brave girl who was running from danger. I hope she found peace." We never knew her name. Grandmother said she used different names with different people, never trusting anyone enough to tell the truth. Thompson attempted to trace Anna's path into Canada, but Canadian immigration records from 1921 were incomplete. He found no definitive evidence of Anna Zalewski or any of her known aliases entering Canada. She might have crossed the border without documentation, which was more common and easier in 1921 than it would later become. The trail went cold in rural Wisconsin in 1921. Thompson could not determine with certainty what happened to Anna and Stanislav after they left the Wojcik farm, but he made one more discovery that suggested a possible ending to the story. In Toronto newspaper archives, he found an obituary from 1985 for a woman named Anna Novak, age 84, who had died in Toronto. The obituary mentioned that she had emigrated from the United States in the 1920s and had raised her son alone after her husband's death in an industrial accident. The son was named Stanley Novak, and he had become a labor rights attorney in Toronto. Thompson contacted Stanley Novak's widow, who confirmed that her late husband had been born in America in 1920 and had come to Canada with his mother as a toddler. "My husband rarely spoke about his early childhood," Mrs. Novak told Thompson. "He said his mother had fled some kind of danger in America and had spent years looking over her shoulder, even in Canada. She had changed their names, cut ties with everyone from their past. She never told him all the details, said it was safer if he didn't know." Mrs. Novak shared photographs of her late husband's mother, Anna Novak. The elderly woman in the 1980s photos bore resemblance to the frightened young woman in Stefan Kowalski's 1920 photograph, though decades had transformed her features. "My husband became a labor rights attorney because his mother had told him that his father died fighting for workers' rights," Mrs. Novak explained. She said powerful people had killed him to protect their profits, and she wanted her son to carry on that fight, but to do it safely, through legal means. She made him promise never to take the kind of risks his father had taken. Thompson could not prove conclusively that Anna Novak of Toronto was the same person as Anna Zalewski/Kowalczyk of Detroit, but the circumstantial evidence was compelling. The timing, the age, the story of fleeing America, the son born in 1920, the connection to labor rights. If Anna Novak was indeed Anna Zalewski, then the story had a bittersweet ending. She had survived. She had kept her son safe. She had lived to old age in Toronto, dying peacefully in 1985. Her son had honored his father's memory through legitimate legal work rather than dangerous organizing. But she had also spent her entire life hiding, never able to return to her homeland, never able to tell her full story. The documents she had carried, the evidence of corruption and murder that had caused her to flee, were never found. Either she had destroyed them, hidden them so well they were never discovered, or taken them to her grave. Thompson organized an exhibition at the Michigan Historical Society in November 2024, titled "The Woman in the White Dress: Identity, Fear, and Survival in 1920s America." Stefan Kowalski's photograph of Anna holding baby Stanislav served as a centerpiece. The exhibition told Anna's story as far as it could be traced, presenting the evidence Thompson had gathered while acknowledging the gaps and uncertainties. Display cases contained documents from Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, and Wisconsin, tracing Anna's flight across the Midwest. The photograph she had commissioned, this desperate documentation of her existence, was displayed alongside in large details, showing her fearful expression, her protective grip on her child, the safe house in the background that represented her last hope of protection. The exhibition explored broader themes about immigrant experiences in 1920s America, the dangers faced by labor organizers, the networks that help people escape threats, the impossible choices faced by those caught between powerful interests. It examined how photography served not just as art or documentation, but as evidence, protection, and proof of existence for people whose lives were precarious and uncertain. Thousands of visitors came to see the photograph that had started as a simple commission and had revealed such a complex story. Many were descended from Polish immigrants and had their own family stories of people who had fled danger, changed names, and recreated their lives in new places. This photograph proves that immigration history is never simple, Dr. Thompson wrote in the exhibition catalog. Behind every portrait of a mother and child might be a story of survival, sacrifice, and secrets. Anna Zalewski, or whatever name she finally lived under, seemed like a loving mother in this image because she was also a woman in mortal danger, a widow protecting evidence of murder and corruption, a refugee seeking safety for a child. The dark secret she carried wasn't evil. It was knowledge, dangerous knowledge that powerful people wanted suppressed. And that knowledge cost her everything: her husband's life, her home, her identity, her past. This photograph is all that remains of Anna's brief time as herself before she had to become someone else entirely. The exhibition concluded with the unanswered questions that would likely remain forever unresolved. Did Anna reach Canada? Did she live into old age as Anna Novak of Toronto? What happened to the documents she carried? Did they expose corruption as her husband had intended? Or were they destroyed to protect powerful interests? The photograph endures, preserved now in digital formats and displayed in museums. A young woman in a white dress, holding her infant son, standing in front of a house that represented safety, her face showing fear and determination in equal measure. A mother who had a dark secret, not of evil, but of dangerous truth. And somewhere, perhaps, descendants who don't know their grandmother's real name or the full story of how she kept them safe.